Okay.
Okay. So the silver tsunami, like I said, the population of people over 65 is trending to be the largest section of the population. And you can see some mile markers here. In 2011, the first of the baby boomer generation turned 65. That's kind of when the wave started. Right now, we have approximately 6 million people living with dementia in the United States. In 12 years, which is, the blink of an eye, the number of people over 65 will outpace the number of people under the age of 17 for the first time in history. That's a very short time away. And then by 2050, which, in the next 30 years, the number of people in this country living with dementia and Alzheimer's will more than double. So we're looking at a huge shift in our population demographic. Next slide, please.
Let's see. There we go. Well, I'm trying, Kristen. There you go.
Okay. So we know that people are living longer and living healthier. In fact, one of the coolest projects I've seen lately is that they are actually finding a cure for HIV. So the more advances that we make in medicine, the longer people are living. And also younger people are waiting longer to have children, and they're not having as many children as the previous generations did. People are more mobile now, so they're not tied to working a family farm like they used to be. And if you can believe this, almost half of today's 5-year-olds, that's the kindergarten class this year, can expect to live to age 100. In 30 years, living to 100 is probably going to be normal for people. And that's outrageous. Think about, for those of you that are in the insurance industry, think about what your longevity tables look like and how that's likely to change in the coming years. Next slide. So today we're going to talk about some ageism, some cultural shifts in our demography, how we can change the way that we communicate, how we can rethink our environmental design, and how we can also change our practices in marketing. Next slide. So what is ageism? Basically, ageism is bias against people who are older. We have a kind of this picture in our minds when you say a senior or a grandmother, and it's somebody that is generally old or they're frail. And that is a bias that we all have. But that has got to change, because we know that just because a senior or an older adult is someone who is defined as a person who is 65 years or older, most of the people that are in that category don't see themselves as being a senior or an older adult. They're still thinking that seniors are older than them. We also have to rethink our terminology in terms like elderly, old person, the aged, boomer. Those are really kind of ageist terms that kind of need to go away. And also we have these images that you might use, like stock images for social media or emails or whatever. And you want to kind of tug at the heartstrings, and you use images of wrinkled hands clasped together, or people that just look frail, or they're on walkers. That's also perpetuates those ageist stereotypes. And then another internal bias that we have to kind of examine within ourselves is how we interact with people that we perceive as being old. Are we kind of paternalistic? Do we do that, oh, honey, sweetie kind of thing? Are we being condescending? Are we making assumptions about what they can and can't do? And on the next slide, I'll show you why you might want to rethink that. Next slide, please. So today's older adults, their retirees, are much more active than they have been in previous generations. We don't have, a bunch of people who hit retirement and then go sit in a rocking chair and knit all day. 62% of those people are out there traveling, seeing the world, doing the things that they couldn't do while they were working full time. Many of them are picking up new hobbies. They're playing pickleball. They're taking up dancing. 26% of those are volunteering. That's our huge volunteer base right there, is our older adults that now have more time on their hands, as well as a wealth of experience to share. And then they're also interested in learning. In Tennessee, if you're over 65, you can attend classes at a university for free without having to register to be a student and pursue a degree program. Next slide, please. We're also much more culturally diverse than we have ever been in this country. We have a lot of people who came here as immigrants who are now aging in place. And we also have a lot of people who are bringing their elderly parents here to retire. And so you can see in this table here, the orange on the bottom is the 2020 statistics from our last census. And then the yellow is what's projected in the next 30 years. So you can see not only we're having an overall increase in the number of people, but so they're going to be much more diverse. So Asians and Pacific Islanders are the ones that are trending the highest, followed by Native Americans and African Americans. And then Caucasians are kind of trending at a slower rate. Next slide. So one thing is that, because we're becoming more culturally diverse, we're also going to have to think about utilizing more translation services and also maybe having signage in our businesses in languages other than English. Or you can have maybe like a little sign that's, that maybe says one thing in multiple languages, and then they can pick their language. So even though we know people are living longer, they're living healthier, they're more active, there are some physiological changes that happen in aging, and that happen to the best of us. And so we need to kind of think about some shifts in the way that we communicate with one another. And we also need to teach this to our younger generations who probably haven't had as much interaction with older adults or their grandparents, like say for people of my generation. So we need to make sure that we speak clearly and enunciate, especially if we're wearing the mask. You can't understand what anybody. We want to speak a little louder, but we don't want to shout. We don't want to, do you hear the words that are coming out of my mouth? We don't want to adopt that kind of attitude. But just speak up and speak clearly. We also want to slow down. If you're a fast talker, you might need to practice slowing down a little bit and then giving others a chance to react and respond, because our ability to take in information and process it and then respond appropriately does slow down a little in older adult life. And then if somebody's having trouble understanding you and they say, what? Or come again? And you say it again and they're still looking confused, just try to rephrase that question, because if somebody has even the beginning stages of dementia where maybe they're not exhibiting a lot of those hallmark behaviors, they may still have a slowdown in their processing. And one of the first things to go really is your language center. So you might just have to rephrase what you're saying in a different ways and give them time to catch on to what you're saying. Next slide, please. So we also need to think about our environmental design. Of course, everybody now, every business is required to be compliant with the Americans with Disabilities Act, which is a good jumping off place. But I think in the coming years, we're going to have to expand it. We're going to have to tweak it a little bit. And some things that you can do, and maybe if you don't own the building that your office is in, maybe if you're a tenant, you can suggest this to your property management, simply because not only is it good business for you, but it's also less liability for them. So you're gonna, maybe add more and clearer signage. I really hate when I'm trying to find an office in an office park and the signs are teeny tiny and I can't read them until I'm right up on them. And then also more handicap accessible parking, because the more older adults we have, the more incidents we're going to have of people who aren't able to walk as far. So we're going to need some more dedicated handicap accessible parking spaces. Increased lighting. If you have visual impairments and you walk in these places that are kind of dim, you're going to be more likely to fall, and you're also going to have less success at trying to find where you're going. And if a client can't find you, then that's a problem. And also in your waiting rooms, if you have seating for people in your waiting room, make sure that those chairs have arms so that somebody with lower strength in their lower body can push up on those arms and be able to stand without struggling. And then if you're in an office that is in a big building, has these really long hallways, you might consider maybe just putting a little bench halfway down the hall or something like that, because some people just can't walk as far as they used to and they get tired out. Also, put some handrails in those long hallways and extra handrails on steps. I think ADA requires only one set of handrails. It's really better to have two, just for extra safety. More contrast on steps and curbs. I know, like, I'm don't qualify as a senior yet because I'm under 65, but still a lot of these curbs that are the same color as the pavement can trip you up, and you definitely don't want to be responsible for somebody falling on your property. And so think about someone who has low vision or vision impairments. Just a contrasting color on a curb or at the edge of a step can make a really big difference. Bathroom stall doors that swing out instead of in. I don't know whose idea it was to have the stall doors to swing in, and then you kind of have to suck it in and shimmy around the door. It's really a poor design. But if they swing out, and you have more stalls that are handicap accessible that have that larger space in there, that's definitely going to be a necessary thing. And then also more grab bars, not just in the handicap accessible stalls, but in the regular stalls. And maybe even a taller toilet, which is part of the ADA, because then people don't have to go down as far when they're trying to get to the bathroom and suffer a fall or accidentally hit the toilet too hard and break it away from the wall. I've seen that happen. And the reason I'm spending a lot of time on bathrooms is because a lot of older adults have incontinence issues, and so making those bathrooms more accessible and having extra signage on where those bathrooms are can make a really big difference in someone's dignity. And then also no rugs. If you have an office and it's really nicely decorated, but it has a throw rug on the floor, you might want to rethink that, because the edges of those rugs can trip people up and cause them to fall, especially if they have to use a walker or a rollator like the lady in this picture. So it's just a smarter way of rethinking our environmental design and making it more accessible and inclusive. Next slide, please. So we're also going to have to change the way we market Older adults are a huge consumer base, and they typically have the most expendable income. And they have the advantage of more life experience, and they know what they want. And a lot of them have, learned to filter out a lot of sales techniques that we kind of have been taught over the years, and they don't want to hear it. They just want you to tell them what they're wanting to know. And good customer service, that is something I think is lacking. And I think we can all agree that we have experienced some bad customer service. So maybe for your older workers, if they're kind of getting to the point where their main job is getting a little difficult for them, maybe you can reutilize them in a training capacity to train younger workers on how to be good customer service, or provide good customer service, because if they're treated well, they're going to have your repeat business. They also make up the largest voting bloc. They will go to the polls come heck or high water. Whether they're having to hobble there on one leg, they are really devoted to making their opinions known at the polls. They're also 80% of them are into technology, especially during the pandemic. A lot of people had to pivot and learn how to use things like Zoom. They are increasingly more tech savvy, and 50% of them are on Facebook. So if you're not utilizing Facebook for your business, you might want to rethink about it. We also need to change our marketing materials, and we need to make sure that those marketing materials include images that are inclusive and feature diverse populations, and they're representative of various ethnicities and abilities. So featuring people who are Asian, Indian, Native American, Middle Eastern, those are the fastest growing populations in our country. So if you're representing those in your imagery, then they're going to be more likely to connect with you. Larger fonts. There are fonts that are easier to read, languages other than English, and also reflect the desires of today's active aging culture. So we want to get away from those stereotypical old folks images and show people that are having a good time in their golden years. And also reflect the value that older adults bring to our society. And, that has been a real shift over the generations. It used to be that grandma and grandpa lived with you, and they helped take care of the kids, and they helped take care of the house, and in turn the younger generations took care of them. And over the generations, we've kind of gotten to the point where old age is a burden, and it's really not. It's an asset, and so we need to start promoting that value again, that older adults are an asset. They have a wealth of wisdom, their living history, and we have a lot to gain from them. Next slide, please. And so here's a little summary, just to kind of recap. People over 65 make up the fastest growing segment of our population. They're much more ethnically and culturally diverse than previous generations. The old ageist attitudes and stereotypes do not apply to today's modern older adult. They value opportunities to stay active and useful. And we need to be more accommodating to older adults and their unique needs. And we need to recognize the immense value that older adults bring in experience and wisdom. Next slide. And that's it in a nutshell.